Greetings, book lovers everywhere. I'm E-Train and welcome to E-Train Talks. And today I have a very special guest. This is Janae Marks, the author of A Soft Place to Land, on air with Zoe Washington, which is coming next week, February 14th. From the Desk of Zoe Washington, her first book. And she's also took part in the Hope Wins anthology, which featured amazing authors like James Ponti, Stuart Gibbs, Adam Gidwitz, and a lot of others. So, before we get started, here are just a couple awards that Janae has won, just to put things into perspective of how amazing her books are and why you should buy them. So Janae, in the Connecticut magazine, she is part of the 40 Under 40, which is really awesome. She was also part of Black Creators HQ and the outstanding Renegades of Middle Grade, with authors like Aaron Soderbergh Downing, James Ponti, and a lot of other middle grade favorites like Janae. So, Janae, thank you so much for joining me today. It is an honor, and I'm sure everybody is hoping to read On Air with Zoe Washington right when it comes out. They've already had their pre-orders in, and when people see this, they're immediately going to press the order button.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be on here. It's an honor for me too, to be interviewed by you, because it's so cool to see all of the other authors you've interviewed in your podcast and all of the posts you made and your YouTube channel and Instagram. You're doing so many cool things. So thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you. And you're doing cool things as well, especially with all of your books. I devoured every single one of them, just like all the characters in Zoe Washington devour her cakes and treats. So, my first question for you is, can you just tell us a bit about your days in, get this everybody, musical theater? Janae actually wanted to be in musical theater before wanting to become an author. So can you tell us a bit about that and what inspired you to become the writer you are today?
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I think I might have been in the 4th or 5th grade when my parents took me to see my first Broadway musical. And I just fell in love with it, just seeing musicals. Luckily, we lived in a suburb. I grew up in a suburb right outside of New York City. So every once in a while, we could go into the city and go see a show. And I just loved it. And I loved singing, too. So I would often, see the show, get the soundtrack, bring the sound, play the soundtrack. Back then it was all CDs, and like blast them in my room and sing along. And I just loved that so much. And so in high school, I started to think more about if I really love musical theater this much, I should try to be more involved with it at school. So I joined a few of the plays my freshman and sophomore year in school. And I was part of the chorus, and just a lot of my favorite activities in general, just in high school, were performing arts. Like I did dance class. I took, I took voice lessons at one point. I took some acting classes in like a local place at one point. So I just really was into it. But then there were two things that kind of made me shift away from it. Number one, I actually auditioned to be in like college programs for theater. So like if you want to go to college and want to be in one of these programs for theater, often you have to audition ahead of time. And I auditioned for like 4 different school theater programs and didn't get into a single one of them. So that was kind of like the first moment where I was like, okay. And also it wasn't so much the rejection. I think it was more the experience of auditioning made me realize, like, I don't even know if I like this enough, like to want to go through that again. So I ended up going to college and doing some theater on the side when I was in college. So I still got to do it and it was fun. But I think I kind of realized, like, you know what? I think the part of musicals that I like the most, honestly, is the storytelling and like just getting lost in the story. And my mom even told me, like, you're always into writing, like maybe you should go into writing plays. And I wasn't necessarily interested in writing plays, but I kind of realized how much I enjoyed writing stories in general. I always liked writing as a kid for fun, but I never really thought about becoming an author. But when I was in college, I became an English major and took some creative writing classes. And I kind of realized, like, the things that I love about theater was the stories, and I can tell my own stories. So yeah, it kind of was just sort of like a natural shift once I sort of realized maybe performing wasn't what I love the most about it. Though I still love theater to this day, as a viewer.
Well, I'm sure we're all grateful that you kind of went from musical theater into writing, because now we have your 3, and I guess you could say 1/12 of the book in Hope Wins to show for it. And
Yeah.
do you still blast music like from the 90s, 2000s, or whatever your jam is and sing it in the shower or something?
Oh, totally. Yeah. If anybody has read From the Desk of Zoe Washington, they'll know that there's a lot of songs in there. And it was really fun to pick out some of those songs because some of those were the songs that I listened to when I was a kid or, a teen. So yeah, and even Broadway, songs I still will see plays, now and get the soundtrack, on my phone and I'll play them, when I'm doing things. So I still very much appreciate music. Yeah, it's definitely still a big part of my life.
Well, I love musical theater too, and everything about music, it brings people together a lot like books. So there are a lot of connections between music and stories, and sometimes there are music stories.
Yeah,
And
exactly. I feel like so many of these works, whether it's music, books, theater, are about telling some sort of story through a medium. So I think they all kind of connect.
yeah. And my next question is one that I'm very, very excited to ask. As I mentioned earlier, from the On Air with Zoe Washington, the sequel to From the Desk of Zoe Washington, it is coming this Tuesday. From the time of recording, it's coming February 14th, and I am so excited. I have my own copy right now, but I would want to order it again and again just to read it for the first time once more. And can you tell us a bit about On Air with Zoe Washington, but without spoiling anything?
Yeah. So yeah, it is kind of hard to talk about it because it definitely spoils the first book. But essentially, if you read the first book, which tells the story of, Zoe and kind of redeveloping a relationship with her father who's been incarcerated her whole life. And then in that story, she ends up finding out that he might be innocent of his crime. And so she ends up trying to uncover the truth. So by the end of the book, you kind of, there's an epilogue. And, if you kind of got to the end and you're like, oh, I wonder what happens next. I kind of, this is the next book really goes into what happens next after that epilogue in the first book. So certain things that are, if you liked the first book, that'll be in the second book again, are tons of baking again. There's a lot of family themes, especially, again, more relationships with Zoe and her parents, and still friendship themes as well. So, yeah, I think that if you like the first book, you should hopefully really like the second one as well, because it continues the story and a lot of the same themes.
And speaking of friendship themes, I don't think this is a spoiler, but Zoe's two best friends kind of become a thing if you're interested in
there's a crush. There's, she ends up being kind of put in the middle of her two friends liking each other and admitting to her that they like each other. And that becomes a whole thing because, she feels a little bit left out. So that's definitely a new, challenge she has to deal with in this story.
Yeah, that's kind of what happens when you grow older and you're in your teen years. I don't have experience because I'm not a teen yet, and I'm honestly really scared for that.
I know. And that's the thing. Yeah, it's like with this age group, writing for this age group, not everybody is interested in that yet. And I think even in the story, I kind of go into how Zoe herself is not really interested in that yet, but it happens. It starts to happen. And I remember being in middle school and it's starting to happen to me too. Like some of my friends are starting to be interested in that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of what middle grade is for, to teach you about like don't be scared about this kind of stuff. It's going to be happening. Of course, you can be really scared,
yeah,
but
it's okay.
It's going to happen, and it's all kind of part of the process. And speaking of processes and all that kind of stuff, and From the Desk of Zoe Washington and the sequel, On Air with Zoe Washington, baking is one of the central themes. And baking is really a process. I've only baked a few things, with my mom, but the process is just sometimes grueling, it's always really fun. So baking brings Zoe and her father, Marcus, closer together. And that makes Zoe so happy, and also Marcus as well. So why did you choose baking as a way to bring Zoe and Marcus close together? And are you a fan of baking yourself?
Yeah, so I decided to add baking to the story because when I was coming up with some of the other, plot lines in the first book, I realized that some of them are kind of heavier, like her engaging with this idea of whether or not, Marcus has been wrongfully convicted, just thinking about, the prison system and that sort of thing. So I decided to add something lighter. And so I was like, well, what is it that I like? Even if I'm not an expert in it, because I do enjoy baking, but I'm not an expert baker. I don't bake all the time. I bake every once in a while. But it is something I enjoy sometimes, but I'm not at anywhere close to Zoe's level. But what I do really enjoy is watching all of those baking competition shows that are everywhere now. So like the Food Network's Kid Bake Championship is the one that kind of really inspired the show that Zoe wants to be on in the first book, and sort of her personality around baking, because I watched that show and there's all these kids and they're really good at baking and they're really passionate about it. And I just was so inspired by that and thought it'd be really fun to make her kind of one of those kids. So yeah, I think I was able to get a lot of knowledge about baking just from watching all of these different shows, because at the end of the episode, they have the judges, judging these creations, and they'll tell you like what works, what doesn't work. So you kind of start to, notice some trends. So that kind of helped me a lot in writing about the baking. But yeah, that was, and I figured like food is a thing that kind of brings people together. So I felt like it could be a way for her to connect to Marcus is through food.
Yeah, and I saw that you brought up Nailed It in On Air with Zoe Washington, and that's one of my favorite shows, and baking shows especially. So
yeah. I feel like if I were to, if I could compete on a baking show, that's probably the only one that I could maybe do well in and Nailed It, because like the expectations are pretty low. But yeah, no, I enjoy it. That show's super fun. Yeah, I think there's just so many of those baking shows out there that I think if you like those kind of shows, you'll hopefully like the Zoe baking scenes.
Yeah, I certainly like them. And my next question for you is, so this is also just to kind of put things into perspective for everybody who hasn't yet read either On Air with Zoe Washington or From the Desk of Zoe Washington. So Marcus, Zoe's paternal father, was wrongfully accused of a crime and was in prison for nearly Zoe's entire life. He couldn't afford a good lawyer, and if it wasn't for Zoe's bravery, Marcus would never have been free for a while. So the topic of falsely imprisonment is not a topic I've really read about in middle grade before. So can you share why you chose this to be a main storyline, and what message you'd like your readers to take away from Marcus's tale?
Yeah, so I was actually inspired to write this book after listening to a podcast, so it's appropriate that I'm also on a podcast now talking about it. Back in 2014, there was this podcast called Serial, which is spelled Serial, and it told the story of, basically the first season told the story of a man who was in prison for a serious crime, but a lot of people think that he didn't actually commit this crime. And so the podcast was kind of going behind the scenes through the case and showing us, going back to certain scenes, in the environment, like in the town that it took place in, and talking to different people and everything. And it really just got me thinking about this idea of wrongful conviction. So I started just researching it out of curiosity, thinking like, I don't know, maybe I could put this in a book. So yeah, I learned about the Innocence Project, which is an organization that's mentioned in the book, but also exists in real life. And they help overturn cases like this. They have lawyers who help work with inmates who have been wrongfully imprisoned and help get their cases overturned. And they also have people who work to try to just change the system, and change the laws and try to make things better. And so from reading again through their website, it just got me inspired. And because, at this point, I knew I still liked writing for kids, young readers, I automatically started thinking about it from that point of view and was like, well, what if there was a story about a girl or a kid who had a parent who was possibly wrongfully imprisoned? And so that's kind of where it got started. It was just sort of my curiosity, because I don't have personal experience with this, but, I was able to do a lot of research and talk to different people, to try to write the story authentically. But yeah, and as for what I hope they take away, I hope that readers are inspired by Zoe's story and Marcus's story, and maybe they'll be inspired to learn more about the Innocence Project, and go on there and search around themselves or watch a documentary about this issue, and maybe the more kids like you that get to learn about this at a younger age, the more awareness there is around this problem, maybe things could change, and maybe in the future we could, this won't be as big of an issue. I've even had some readers say like, this made me want to become a lawyer when I grew up, so it's like maybe the youth of today will hear about these kind of things and want to actually do something when they're old enough to, you could do something now. Like Zoe obviously was able to use her voice now, but in terms of like changing the system, that's a little bit tougher to do, but at least raising awareness will help hopefully lead to change in the long term.
Definitely. And I love that you brought up that kids can do a lot, because that's kind of a main topic here. Kids can really do anything, and we don't get enough credit for all the powerful things that we can do and that we actually do. And also, I want to shift gears a little bit to A Soft Place to Land, which actually recently came out in paperback. So it was your second book, and it kind of tackles the topic of separation between parents, and Hope's parents are kind of going through this. And that's kind of one of the topics. A Soft Place to Land was a wild and livable and awesome ride that I could not put down. So can you just tell us a bit about why you chose to have not necessarily divorce, but kind of as a theme, and also the secret little area where all the kids in the apartment got together. Is that from experience too?
Yeah, so the Soft Place to Land was actually kind of inspired by a personal experience, unlike Zoe Washington. So when I was a teenager, my parents got separated and I moved, and they ended up deciding to sell the house that I'd grown up in my whole life. And then my mom and I moved into an apartment across town. And so in A Soft Place to Land, Joy goes through a very similar experience, like except in her case, her parents aren't separated at that point. They're still together and they, due to financial troubles, have to move. And she's going through a tough time. And I also went through a tough time adjusting, like I missed the old house I had lived in. She misses her old house. And on top of that, in her case, they can no longer afford her piano lessons, which she was really excited about. In my case, it was different. So there's like some similarities, some ways that I kind of took it into a fictional place. And the other storyline of her, through her friends in the building, discovering the secret hideout. That part was totally made up. Unfortunately, the building I moved to did not have a secret hideout. But that was, it was kind of like sometimes when you write about your own experiences, you got to find ways to make it more interesting than what happens in real life. So that was one way of kind of like, where can I take this story next to make it into a more interesting story? But yeah, so that was, having her discover the hideout and involving the mystery was, it came through conversations I was having with my editor about this story and how I can kind of make it even better. And so we had this idea of like, maybe I can add something interesting, like a place in the building they go to or something. So yeah, it kind of just happened through just brainstorming ideas for the story. But yeah, the original inspiration was more personal for me.
That's really interesting. And I also think that adding the secret hideout, because kind of like what happened with Zoe Washington, it's a bit of a heavy subject for middle graders and young readers. So adding that kind of secret hideout and the storyline behind that, everything that goes on there, which you'll have to read A Soft Place to Land to find out what happens.
Yeah, I think just the themes of community, within this building and then within this like secret hideout space and like kind of feeling more at home. Like a lot of what she's struggling with is feeling at home. And so I think, I think locations and places in the story kind of tie into the themes. And yeah, it was fun to play around. And I mean, who wouldn't want to have a secret hideout in their building? Like it was just cool. It was just fun to write because it sounds so fun. I wish it existed in real life.
Yeah, that did exist. I would want to go to that apartment right away.
Yeah, like it sounds so fun. So
it does. And my next question is about Hope Wins. So I'm just curious to know how you got involved in the anthology. Did the editor-in-chief kind of ask you, or was it kind of through your author friends?
Yeah, it was actually the first one. So the editor, Rose Brock, she's an educator who also runs in Texas, the North Texas Teen Book Festival. And so that's like this organization that she runs there. And I had been to the festival once and I must have met her there or through other channels, but somehow randomly I just got an email like from her asking if I would be involved in this anthology. So this is actually, they had another anthology for young adult readers that she'd done a few years earlier. And then she said, we decided we want to do one for the middle grade readers. And so, yeah, she asked me if I wanted to be part of it. And it was kind of an immediate yes, because I saw the roster of all the other authors that were going to be on it. And I was like, this sounds amazing. Like, so yeah, it basically explained what the purpose of it would be, that we would all write sort of more nonfiction personal stories from our either childhoods or lives that feel hopeful. And this was around the pandemic that she reached out to us. I think we were all, the early days of the pandemic. So I think we were all feeling like, we all need to like be thinking about more hopeful stories right around now. So yeah, that was kind of how I got invited. And then when coming up with the story idea, I kind of realized that writing about my long and winding journey to be published could be a good story, because a lot of kids always ask, how did you get started with writing? How long did it take? And, it was a really long, it was a long journey that really did involve me having to have moments of hope in order to feel like it was going to work out. So hopefully kids who have any kind of dream, whether it's to be a writer or anything else, like feel inspired by reading my essay in there about how perseverance eventually did pay off.
I love that. Perseverance does pay off, and hopefully you'll all check out Hope Wins, because it is such a, hopeful and also just amazing read with some of your favorite authors. I'm not going to read the entire list, but there are some really big ones like R.L. Stein.
Yeah, I mean, I was similarly like, like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Having all these
Christina Soontornvat, Janae Marks, of course, and a lot of great ones. And my next question for you is, in preparing for our talk, I also read that thousands of people have been wrongfully convicted and imprisoned across the United States. And one site even said that there are more innocent people in our jails and prisons today than ever before, which makes a lot of sense and also doesn't at the same time. There's a lot
Right.
of, I guess, it's kind of a heavy subject, so I'm not going to dive too deep into it, but you would think that after all that's happened in this country, that there would be less wrongfully convicted people, that the system would be a lot stronger and smarter and kinder, I guess you could say. So, I'm just curious to know if there's anything that kids or adults alike can do to try and put an end to this, and who is the most likely kind of, whether race or anybody, to be falsely accused?
Yeah. So in terms of what you can do, I mean, it's hard to know. It feels like such like a broken system that it feels like kind of daunting to try to figure out how to fix it. But I do think that the more awareness there is around it, the more that people know about this, and can, speak up about it, like just, I feel like in general, like when it comes to any issue, the more awareness there is around it, the more likelihood that things could change in the future. I mean, a lot of these kinds of things happen, like not to make this about politics, but, when it comes to those kinds of things, a lot of it can happen in your communities. If you feel strongly that like, somebody in your community could vouch for the kind of things that you want, you can vote for them, so that like at the very least, kids who are listening to this who are going to eventually be old enough to vote, that's something you can do, because you can think about what are the policies that this person do I care about, that this person might be able to help make change. I can vote for them. But I think just raising awareness, even Zoe in the second book, which this isn't too much of a spoiler because you see it on the cover, she has a microphone just like you. She decides to make a podcast, to share some of her thoughts and raise awareness around some of the issues that wrongfully convicted people face. And I just think that the more people know about it, the more likelihood that there could be change in the future, whether it's, in a political way or, even just the people who made that podcast, they were able, the one that I said inspired the first Zoe book, Serial, they were able to make a difference because they told his story. It brought so much attention to this situation that now he actually has been exonerated.
Wow.
Since then, years later. It took many years, but it's like, and kids can do that too. It's you can start be the one to say, hey, something's wrong here. I want to talk about this. And maybe you don't have the power to go into the courtroom and make the change in that level, but you can share and have these conversations. And the more people know about it, then hopefully the more people will want to do something to fix it, and it'll find its way to the bigger people who have more power. So yeah, I just think that like raising awareness, honestly, is, I think, and just, informing yourself about these things can be a way to help. And then who is likely to be falsely accused? From my research in the Innocence Project website, and there's also some other organizations who have like kind of run the data around this. I found that, Black people are far more likely, innocent Black people are far more likely to be wrongfully convicted than innocent white people. There definitely is a racial element there, which is partially why I decided to, tell the story and make Marcus a Black man. When you look through the Innocence Project, even just the cases that they've helped, you can just see the photos. You could just look through the photos and see that the majority of them are men of color even. So, which, to be honest, isn't super surprising given like, the world we live in, but, is disheartening, obviously. So again, I think the more awareness that is raised around this, maybe change can be made. Again, I hope that like the prison system and the court system can be more like less biased and more fair and more kind, like you were saying. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a matter of like today's youth growing up and becoming the judges and the lawyers, and filling those spots when you're older, like, it's like we all can do a part, I think, though, in helping make a difference just by being aware of it and making small little changes in your life that could lead to bigger change for everybody.
I don't want to sound adulty here, but kids, we have the power. Let's go out and make a difference.
Yeah, like if you believe in this so strongly, you can go. Like those kids that have written to me and said, this made me want to be a lawyer. If they went to go be a lawyer, they could really make a difference one day, a bigger difference. I mean, now they can make a difference just by sharing, and being more aware and maybe talking to friends and family about these issues. But when they're old enough to actually be in the courtroom, they could really make a huge difference. If they become a judge, they can make a huge difference. So it's,
Yeah, they really can. We all really can.
Yeah.
And my next question is, well, for starters, your writing is just so moving and it's really relatable. And I love your books. They're some of my absolute favorites. And I'm curious to know, do you have any other stories coming out? Is there a Zoe Washington book 3, a Soft Place to Land book 2, or any standalone stories that may become series that you're writing?
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for saying that. I'm so happy that you've enjoyed my books. Yeah, I am working on more things. I have another middle grade novel coming out next year. It'll be another standalone. But this one, it hasn't been announced yet, so I can't really share a title, but I can say that it's a little bit of a departure from my previous books because the previous books are always been straight realistic fiction, contemporary, and this one is going to be realistic, but with a little bit of magic in it. So it's going to be a little bit of a departure, kind of like magical realism, I guess, where it still takes place in our world, but there's like magic kind of exists, and there's going to be some of that in there. And I'm excited because it's been kind of fun to write something different, but kind of the same. I still feel like it has a lot of similar themes that carry through a lot of my books, especially friendship themes, and family themes and passionate kids, but yeah, there's gonna be a little bit of magic. So I'm excited about that. Yeah. And I don't know if I don't think there's going to be any more Zoe Washington books, only because I really do feel like I said this about the first book, and I wasn't even planning to write a sequel. I really do feel like it's wrapped up now and that there's not really much else that needs to be said. But never say never, because I never expected to even write the sequel. And as for Soft Place to Land, I mean, I would love to revisit some of those characters, especially because there's this like whole horde of characters in the book that I could even write a book from their point of view. It kind of all depends on my publisher's interest in that. So yeah, if the book, continues to sell well and people like it, maybe I could come back to that story from maybe a different character's point of view. That could be cool. So we'll see.
That would be very cool. And I mean, I would love to see a Zoe Washington sequel. Besides, but though it might kind of become a YA as Zoe.
I know, and that's the other thing too. She's older in the second book due to like the nature of the ending. Yeah. I not to spoil it, but essentially she has to grow up in this book. And so she's 14 and she's just about to enter high school. And that was what my editor was saying too. I was like, can I even write a book about a 14-year-old? And she was like, well, as long as she's not in high school yet, it's still middle grade. So yeah, it would be hard. I think at this point it would have to be YA. And there are very few book series that travel with the character through different categories like that. I would say maybe Harry Potter is the only one I can really think of. I don't know. So I don't really think that that's going to happen. But yeah, you never say never. But no, I'm honestly like really pleased with the way these two books have come together. And I'm really glad. Honestly, it was because of readers like you that I even thought to write a sequel, because I would go to school visits and they would ask me. And at first I was like, no, I don't think I'm going to write a sequel. I feel like it's done. But then the more they asked, the more I really started thinking about it. So yeah. I definitely dedicate the book to readers because it really is because of them that I was able to do it. So yeah, I mean, I'm just really happy that I was able to do the sequel. And if that's the end for Zoe in the book form, then that's fine. Yeah. I know one of your other questions you sent me was about the movie. So there's a chance too of seeing her come to life in the screen. So that'll be another life for her as well. Yeah. We'll see.
And your magic story kind of sounds like an Amari and the Night Brothers kind of vibe. So
yeah. So I know. Yeah. There are a lot of I feel like there's a lot of readers out there that enjoy, there's so many other books out there too that do this and readers enjoy it. So it'll be fun to maybe, maybe gain some new readers that may only like to read books that have magic in it. Maybe they don't read regular straight contemporary. So it'll be fun to maybe connect with some new readers too.
Yeah, it would be a lot of fun. And you brought up the movie. So yeah, I am so excited because in the works at the moment is a Zoe Washington movie. I was so excited when I stumbled upon it. And I know that sometimes movies are they sometimes stall out. I really hope this one doesn't. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe like if there are any differences between the book and the movie, maybe who the main character who plays Zoe is, and a little bit and anything
Yeah,
else?
I wish I had all those details yet. So it is true that sometimes movie studios or producers or whatever will license the right for a book to make it into a movie, and then it doesn't actually happen. So I was aware of that when they signed it up. But because of the way they talked about it and the fact that they ended up bringing in another producer like months after they first, so I first signed this deal with Disney Channel and they make Disney Channel original movies. And then months later, they decided to bring on Kerry Washington as producer. So now it's also going to be partly with her production studio, which is pretty cool and exciting. So because they announced her, they brought her in, they didn't have to do that. It's like, and then they kept they kept including it on some recent press releases that they've had around Disney Channel in general. Like they just on the bottom, they'll say like, oh, so-and-so is working on this movie. So it's one of those things where like, it's updates are kind of few and far between at the moment because I think that they're kind of dealing with a lot of other projects that probably got delayed due to COVID. So the last I heard, they're working on a screenplay. So I hope that, we will get to see it and, actually see it become a movie. But because it's really only in the screenplay part now, like we don't have, like the casting hasn't been decided yet. Like any of that stuff hasn't been decided yet. I don't even have a date yet. So I'm hoping that like just this year, I'll just get more updates and I'll be able to share more updates with you about it. But hopefully sooner rather than later, they'll actually start. From what I've heard, a lot of times once it gets to the production stage, then things move quickly. It's just a matter of like before that part, they might be juggling so many things that they don't get the chance to actually start making the movie yet. But yeah, I will see with the screenplay, like what differences there'll be. But from talking to them, it sounded like they really did want to keep it as close to the story as possible, at least like, the heart of the story. They might have to make some changes just because actually showing certain things on camera might be harder than it was for me to write them. But yeah, I think the heart of the story will stay the same from what I gather. And I'm very excited, just as excited as everybody else to find out more, Yeah,
and everybody, let's knock on wood, cross our fingers and toes, and let's keep on waiting and hoping for updates because we all want to see Zoe Washington come to life on the screen. And with Disney Channel and Kerry Washington, like when my dad heard that Kerry Washington was going to be producing this, he was like, "Oh, she's awesome in a lot of the movies that I like." So
yeah, she's great. And Disney Channel, I mean, they have the power to make it. They make movies all the time, so I think it feels much more of a sure deal than if it was with anybody else. But we'll see. Hopefully, I'll have news soon.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can share it on Twitter or Instagram or your social medias, but we'll keep on waiting and waiting because
as soon as I'm allowed to share, I will absolutely share an update. Yeah.
And maybe not that patiently because we all want to see it, but patiently and not patiently, I guess you could say.
I know. Yeah, I'm in the exact same boat because, one thing that people might not realize too is how little participation authors have, in the movies that get made on their books. It kind of depends. If you get brought on as like an executive producer, you might have a lot of say. But if you aren't, then, things might not work out. Like I think a good example is Rick Riordan has famously said he hates the original movies that were made out of his book. And now they're doing a new series and he's much more involved in the series now. So he's kind of able to start over and make it right. But he was not happy with the movies from what I understand. So that happens sometimes. And it's because the authors don't always get a say. And so I think I will get a little bit of a say. Like they told me I could consult a little bit, but it just hasn't gotten to that point yet. So we'll see. But hopefully we're all happy with it.
Yeah, I think we all will be. And I don't want to talk bad about the first Percy Jackson movies, but well, that's a topic.
Well, just to say that the author wasn't happy, that speaks volumes, Like I'm sure he was so excited to have them make a movie, and if he wasn't happy with it, that's unfortunate. There may not be bad movies, but he obviously felt like something was missing or they didn't really capture the heart of the books. And so I'm glad that he gets the chance to do it again. And hopefully that won't be the case for me, but
Well, I love the Percy Jackson books and your books, so seeing them all come to life and with Disney.
Yeah, it is exciting as a reader to see the movie. I've watched lots of other adaptations, and it's so fun to get to see the characters come to life on screen.
Probably one of my favorites is Wonder, and that kind of really captures.
Oh, yeah, or even the recent Matilda, that was a book, like those even the first original movie was great, and now the musical is great too. So yeah, there's lots of examples of really good adaptations out there. So I'm hoping mine will be one of those.
I really hope so. And when it does start producing, I know so because the Zoe Washington story, as long as you capture the essence of it.
Exactly. Like if they have to change a few plot points or, things like that, it's fine as long as I think the story as a whole feels true.
Yeah. And my next question is, so I was kind of shocked when I saw this. So a lot of authors, their books are kind of based in, they're based in their respective like countries, but they don't really kind of translate into, I guess, so Zoe Washington's series actually has a UK version, The Faraway Truth. While it's not actually a different language, I just found it really interesting how you have an entirely new cover and an entirely new title. So, can you share if there are any major differences in like language? I guess you could say like they speak English, but there's some words like there's baking involved, and they say biscuits and we say cookies.
Right. Yeah. So it was interesting So when they decided to publish the book, it was interesting that they decided they didn't want to keep the title or the cover. I think it's because maybe the phrase "from the desk of" is not something that like is widely used in the UK. While that's a phrase, people have heard of that here. It's like on stationery sometimes. And so I don't know if that's like the main reason. It just wasn't marketable for them. So they decided to change the title, which was fine. And then they decided to get a new illustrator to make the cover. So I love the way the new cover, I think it's really beautiful as well. So I was happy with that. The only thing that is hard is how people often get confused and think that that is a whole other book that I wrote. Yeah. And they're like, oh, I got all your books. Zoe Washington, The Faraway Truth, Soft Place to Land. And I'm like, no. Faraway Truth and Zoe Washington are the same book. So inside, it's exactly the same. I think they just changed the spelling of some words to make them, UK spellings. I don't even think they changed things like from cookie to biscuit. I don't think they did that. I should probably go through and look more carefully. But I know that they changed things like, the spelling, some of their words are spelled slightly differently. But other than that, the story is exactly the same. It just causes some confusion. So I try to make it very clear on my website. This is the same book. And yeah, it's just an interesting thing. I don't know how often it happens that they change the cover and title, but it did for this case. So, and the only other unfortunate thing is that they decided not to publish the sequel. So UK readers, if they want the sequel, will have to find a way to get the US edition shipped to them, because unfortunately this publisher decided not to go. And that's something that I guess happens sometimes. They might change their minds. But as of right now, they felt the first book worked for them and the second one did not. I think a lot of times, like when it comes to foreign rights too, it's like their readers over there have to kind of relate to the stories as well. And so maybe there's a lot of things in this book that are very specific to the US, like the prison system, all that stuff is very specific to the US. So yeah, in some ways it doesn't always translate because it's like, that's not the way things are in the UK. So they may not understand. But it's fine. Yeah. And it also got translated into 2 other languages. It got translated into Turkish. There's a Turkish publisher, and also into Italian. There's an Italian publisher. So that was pretty cool too. They I can't read those and tell you what got changed, but it should be exactly the same in another language, just in the other languages.
If I were to get my hands on an Italian copy, I'd get like an Italian to English dictionary, have it in one hand, the Zoe Washington in
I know.
And just see what does it say.
And those they also kind of slightly changed the titles to make them, I think, work more, but they kept the cover. So they kept the same illustration from the US cover, but they changed the title slightly. So it says something else in that language that still has to do with the word. So Zoe Washington's still in there, but they might have just taken out a phrase or something. But so they still look like they are the same book. The UK edition is a little bit different, but hopefully readers out there will, I just keep reminding people, it's the same book. Don't buy that one if you already have Zoe Washington in English, in US English. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something to keep in mind, folks. And I think I might still get the UK copy just to see the new cover in my hands.
Yeah, I mean, it's like weird to say this, but if you're a collector of Janae Marks, you could have it if you want to.
Yeah. When you have a lot of books one day, I'm gonna be a Janae Marks collector.
That's amazing.
I'm gonna have podcaster, then Janae Marks books collector.
That's awesome.
And my next question for you is, so you're a fan of the Babysitters Club books, and you were as a kid, and I mean, I love the TV shows. I've dabbled a bit into the books, I just haven't really read them a ton, as I don't know, I think I kind of just miss them, and maybe I'm definitely gonna get into those soon. After
they have graphic novels now. I think that's the way that it seems like kids are reading them now, is through the graphic novel versions, which is pretty cool.
So my question for you is, do you ever think back to the books that you read as a kid while writing your stories, for kind of relatability or just style purposes?
Yeah, I mean, not in the sense that I go back and reread the books from my childhood necessarily, although I did also really enjoy the Babysitters Club series and was very upset when they said it was being canceled because I loved them. But I think it's more that I think about what I used to like reading as a kid, and those books I loved because they had so many friendship stories that I could relate to. I just loved the large cast of characters. I feel like that maybe was a nice little influence for the Soft Place to Land in that sense. And yeah, I do feel like they did still tackle some tough issues in there, sometimes sometimes the books would be about a character going through something tough and how they all kind of get through it together. And so I think that just inspired me, in my what I want to write now. So yeah, it's not that I've necessarily gone back and reread them, but I do think that the stories I used to love definitely influence the stories that I like to write about now. And another way that I thought back on them, sort of is also just in the way that how I can take what I loved about them, but also change the things that now I see could be better about them. For example, the Babysitters Club, the series did a great job with this, but the actual original books were not super diverse. There wasn't a ton of diversity in them. There was the one, Claudia, the Asian American main character. But there was, I think, one other Black girl character that was a minor character in the books, but she wasn't there all the time. She wasn't necessarily prominently displayed on the cover. So I think just looking back, I can say that I want to, I think a lot of authors are thinking this way in general now, just wanting to have more diversity in these books, whether it's through the cast of characters or through your main character. But I would say that the show did a good job of kind of changing that a little bit, because they did change, and make some of these characters diverse that weren't actually originally those identities in the book. So I love that about the book, about the series also. But yeah, I think like I'll always think fondly about that series because I loved them as a kid, and I even wrote the author a letter when I was in like the second grade or something. I don't know. And so I just remember, I was super into those books back then.
And I also saw one of the characters from the Babysitters Club in a NerdWallet commercial, and I was like,
oh, really?
Oh my goodness, it's the Babysitters Club character.
I know, and that's the thing too. Like, I love how that series got a chance to expose us to some new talent. That's like, people will ask me like, oh, who do you want to play Zoe Washington in the movie? I hope they pick somebody new, like a new kid, like, so that like after this they can go off to do all these other cool things. Like, that would be really cool. But yeah, I think really cool that the Babysitters Club did that for some kids too.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see, well, we talked about it a little bit, but like Zoe Washington on the big screen, that would be so exciting. And my next question for you is one that I ask every single author that I interview. If you could be or meet any literary character, fictional or real, if you could meet your favorite author or your favorite book character, who would it be and why?
That is a great question. And it's a kind of a tough question because there's so many really great characters out there. But this is just the first one that popped into my head. But I don't know if you've read the series All Four Stars by Tara Derman. It's a few years old now, but there were 3 books in the series, and it's basically about this girl named Gladys Gatsby who sort of becomes a food critic for a major newspaper, but the major newspaper that she's working for does not realize she's a kid because everything is over email. So she's like going to these really awesome websites, restaurants, I mean, and writing these amazing reviews about them and sending them into the newspaper, and they're publishing them thinking that she's an adult, but she's actually a kid. It's just a really fun, adventurous story. And there's 3 books. And I loved them. And I think it'd be fun to not be her, but meet her, because then I could tag along to one of these amazing restaurants that she gets to go to, because she's like a foodie, and like I sometimes like to be a food, like it's fun to go explore new restaurants and try new things. It would be fun to tag along with her on one of those food adventures that she goes on in the book, where she gets to try all these cool things. And yeah, I think it would be fun to follow her around for a day.
Yeah, and being a food critic sounds so much fun. Like, you get to go to all these restaurants, eat some amazing foods, and like when your food doesn't taste the way that you'd like it, people like the restaurant owners and the the servers, they'd actually kind of care about your opinion. Like,
I know,
say, oh, my spaghetti doesn't have like enough butter on it or something like that.
Yeah.
So, a food critic,
although sometimes they have to be sneaky and like go in without them knowing. I think it's harder if you're like a really well-known critic. You have to kind of like go in and try not to be so obvious, because then you want them to give you like their real food without knowing that you're famous. But yeah, regardless, the fact that they get to go around and just try all the best food in like their area, whether it's like savory food or desserts, it just sounds so cool. So I would love to, I think it would just be really fun to hang around with that character for a day. But no, that's an awesome question. And there are so many other answers I can give. Yeah.
And I have not read that the series before, and you're making me hungry for both food and for the character. So,
I know. It's a really fun series that probably deserves more attention. It's like I said, it's a few years old, but I listen to the audiobooks. I don't know if you're an audiobook person, but I really did enjoy listening to the audiobook. The narrator was just really good too. So recommend that if anybody likes audiobooks.
I'm not a huge audiobook person, but I do want to dabble into them a little bit more. So, because like there's school and like all this other stuff going on, so audiobooks kind of feel like something that I do want to try.
Yeah, like in the car, I listen with my daughter to audiobooks in the car when we're driving her, after school to an activity. Like you can listen to 15 minutes at a time, but you can hear a story that way. So it's a nice way to sneak in reading when you're busy.
It is. And thank you just so much for joining me, Janae. You have answered my questions amazingly, and you've both made me hungry for both I kind of want to read these books all over again just to find, like, have the essence and meet the characters once more. And yeah, everybody order A Soft Place to Land. On Air with Zoe Washington. From the Desk of Zoe Washington. Hope wins. And if you're a Janae Marks book collector like I am, Faraway Truth too.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure to chat with you. And I loved all of your questions. And so, yeah, thank you again for your support and for inviting me on.
Well, it has been so much fun for me. And everybody else, I'm sure you're all dying to read all of Janae's books. And if you aren't, you really should be. And thank you just so much for joining me, and have a great day. All of you readers, all of you authors, all of you, whoever you are watching this. Maybe if you're a creepo, don't try and find my IP address. Yeah, just everybody keep reading, and specifically read these books. And yeah, see you in the next one.
Bye.